Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about the 2022 midterms as far as Senate elections go. So we are just roughly 1 year out from the 2022 midterm elections, and that's both the House of Representatives. All of those seats will be up for grabs again, and not just a few, quite a few seats from the United States Senate will be up for grabs again as well. And something to look at in these races is how the Republicans did in Virginia in 2021. Glenn Youngkin won the state of Virginia by a pretty solid margin, really. Over 2 points for a state that Biden won by 10 points in 2020, in the 2020 presidential election. It just shows that really Democrats are in trouble in the midterms, really, is what these elections show, is that Democrats are going to be in trouble come these midterms. And they're going to be in quite a lot of trouble, really, is what it comes down to. And there's no hiding it, really. The fact that the Democrats are really in a tough position going into 2022. They are unpopular. President Biden is unpopular, and these midterms are going to show that. And I'm going to cover a little bit more on these midterms throughout this video. We're going to talk about each of these up for grabs seats, and we will go from there. But I think one thing to point out in this video is there's quite a few Republicans retiring in the 2022 Senate elections. We can see already that 5 Republicans, I believe, are planning to retire. 1 from Missouri, 1 from Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Alabama. But none yet have said that they're retiring from the Democrats. And that's something to point out in today's video, is while the Republicans are going to have that factor, they are going to have to pick new candidates in certain states. And it's definitely something to look at. And 2 of those seats are already marked for the Republicans, and that's Missouri and Alabama. I believe either way, whoever they pick, almost whoever they pick, will ultimately, they'll win in this state. Because the Republicans are just too popular for them not to win, really. But focusing on some of these other states like Florida, let's talk about Florida for a minute. Florida has Marco Rubio as its current incumbent senator up for re-election in 2022. Marco Rubio was a candidate in the 2016 Republican primary for president of the United States. He ultimately lost that. As we know, Donald Trump became the 45th president of the United States. However, something to point out in this is that Marco Rubio was a presidential bid, and I don't think he'll have any problem winning this seat in Florida back for him. I really don't think that he will lose it. Ultimately, I think he will win it, and I think he'll win it by a pretty solid margin going into 2016. And I'm sorry, another state going into 2022. I don't know why I said 2016. But I forgot to put Hawaii in the Democratic column. I think it'll easily go to the Democrats as well. But to continue on talking about this, let's start with the state of Iowa. Iowa is currently held by Chuck Grassley, who did announce he would run for re-election. He will be 89 years old when he runs for re-election in 2022. But the thing is Iowa is a Republican state. Ultimately, it could be characterized as a toss-up state, but it's a Republican state. And Chuck Grassley is popular in this state. And whether he's 89 or he's 55, he will win this race. And I think he'll win it by a pretty solid margin. I could be wrong. Like I always say in my videos, I could be wrong on these races. However, as of today, November of 2021, I think Chuck Grassley will win the race. And I think that Republicans will win quite a few races really going into it. But another race that we can talk about is the state of Ohio and its Senate race. The Republican is retiring. Rob Portman, the current Republican senator from Ohio, is retiring in the 2022 midterm elections. And something to point out in this is that if we look at the Senate in Ohio, we can tell, like I said already, that the Republican is retiring. But Donald Trump won this state by a solid margin, really. And I think if the Republicans pick a good candidate, they'll win the state of Ohio. That puts the Republicans at 47. And we still have a few states to get to. The Democrats are at 46. But a few other states to look at. One is Wisconsin. And the thing about Wisconsin that makes it so hard is Ron Johnson has yet to announce whether or not he will run for re-election again. And I think something to point out in this is that if he doesn't, the Republicans might have a harder time winning this race, but if he does, he could easily win it. I would say, maybe not necessarily super easily, but he could win it by a little bit of a solid margin. And even if he does decide to retire in the state of Wisconsin, I think that the Republicans will win it. We're talking about Virginia, in which a state Joe Biden won by 10 points, going to a Republican. Wisconsin, say they choose someone good for their Senate race. The Republicans could easily win it. Glenn Youngkin won the state of Virginia by over 2 percentage points. That flipped 12% just in 1 year. Imagine what it can do in 2 years if Joe Biden continues to be unpopular. Wisconsin could easily go to the Republicans, I would say. However, like I said, I could be wrong. And I will come on here in a year from now if I am wrong. On my final prediction, if I still say that Wisconsin will be red, I will come on here and I will say I was wrong. And the Democrats flipped it, if that's what happens. But as of today, November of 2021, I would say that the Republicans have a pretty good chance at winning in Wisconsin. New Hampshire, one that has been on my mind and looked at in my head a lot, is the state of New Hampshire. And we're talking about New Hampshire, in which a state that Joe Biden won. However, we're also talking about a time where Joe Biden is very unpopular. And in that case, we're looking at Maggie Hassan, I believe is how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if it's not how you pronounce her name. But we're talking about her, who is up for re-election for the Democratic Party. Is she a good candidate? I don't really know if I would say she's a good candidate. She's an incumbent one-term Democratic U.S. Senator and has declared her intention to run for another term. But the thing is we've been comparing the current Republican governor of the state of New Hampshire, which is likely the Republican nominee, will likely end up being the Republican nominee for the state of New Hampshire. And I think ultimately what we need to look at in this race is if he won the state of New Hampshire as a Republican governor, and he could easily win it as a U.S. Senator. While he wouldn't have the factor of him being an incumbent, he would have the energy factor if Joe Biden continues to be unpopular. And that's why I would say that New Hampshire is probably going to go into the Republican column in 2022. And I'm being very unbiased about this. I think that the Republicans will win in the state of New Hampshire. And people on my Instagram, I'm sure or in the comments of this video, will say, "Well, you have bias. You have bias." And I think, yes, we all have natural bias, but these Senate races are ultimately just going to be favored by Republicans in almost every single state. And another state to look at is the state of Pennsylvania, where another Republican is retiring. We're talking about Pat Toomey, who is retiring in the state of Pennsylvania. However, Joe Biden is unpopular in the state. And even in the case that Pat Toomey obviously decides not to run for re-election, when they pick another Republican primary opportunity for this election, the Republicans are probably easily going to win this race. Maybe not by a super easy margin, but they're probably going to be able to win it by maybe a likely margin, maybe even a lean margin, but at least, I mean, really, we don't know what these races are going to look like ultimately. These are just my predictions as of a year before this election. These can change depending on what Joe Biden's approval rating looks like in a year from now. But as of today, even though Pat Toomey is retiring, there's a good chance that the Republican wins in the state in 2022. Again, I could be wrong, and if I am, I will come on here and I will give you that. Another state to look at is the state of North Carolina, where another Republican is yet retiring. Richard Burr, who voted for the impeachment of Donald Trump, to convict Donald Trump and the impeachment effort. And, you know, the thing is to look at this race. We're talking about, if you see right here, Laura Bush, who decided to run, and her father-in-law, former President Donald Trump, is going to be looked at in this race. There's plenty of people in this race that are going to be looked at as potential nominees to run for the Republicans, and say that they win, which I believe they will in the state of North Carolina, maybe by a likely, maybe even lean margin. I'm not 100% sure what kind of margin that will look like. That gives Republicans control. That gives Republicans control of the state, or of the Senate, I'm sorry. And we still have 3 states left. The Democrats are still at 46 seats. We still have 3 seats left to look at. We'll go ahead and look at Georgia really quick. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush through this video because I don't want it to be like a 30-minute video. I could talk about each of these races for a while. But I'm trying to get through it. We're talking about Raphael Warnock, who won in 2020 in January of 2021, actually. Who won against his Republican challenger, well, not challenger, Republican current senator at the time, Kelly Loeffler, who was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp. And something to look at in this race is Raphael Warnock has been a decent senator. However, the Republicans have that energy factor. And we're talking about someone who, like Herschel Walker, who could easily win certain voters and swing them for him. He has the endorsement of former President Donald Trump. And while Donald Trump lost the state of Georgia, it was a very, very close race in the state of Georgia. And Donald Trump could have easily won it. However, looking at this race, we could see a Republican win this race. Maybe not by a big margin, but we could see a Republican like Herschel Walker win the race in Georgia. Another 2 races to talk about is 2 races where Democrats are incumbents. The first one is Nevada, where we're talking about Cortez Masto, who is the current Democratic senator from the state of Nevada. Do I think she will win? Right now, I would say yes. But if these poll numbers continue, and if Joe Biden continues to be unpopular, she could easily lose this election. And I know I continue to say easily lose, and I don't necessarily mean by super easy way. The Republican would definitely have to try hard. But she could lose this election, considering that Glenn Youngkin flipped a state that Joe Biden won by over 10 points in the 2020 election just a year later. Staying away from the former president helped him a little bit. Former President Donald Trump was not very involved in the race. Besides endorsing Glenn Youngkin didn't want Donald Trump in the state because he knew it would hurt his chances of winning. The same thing could happen in Nevada. If the Republican who wins the Republican primary decides to take the endorsement of Donald Trump but not take it overboard, Nevada could easily go in the Republicans' favor. As of today, I would say that it has a better chance of going to the Democrats. However, it could easily flip to the Republicans. And that's something that the Democrats should be worried about. Because if it did, that could give the Republicans a 54-seat advantage if we give them Arizona, which I'm now talking about. I'm now going to talk about the state of Arizona, where Joe Biden won. Mark Kelly won in 2020 for a two-year term, since it was a special election. Mark Kelly won. And this is the same seat that former Senator John McCain held. And something to look at in this race, again, is the energy factor. The energy factor is on the Republican side. There is no denying that. And I think, ultimately, Mark Kelly could easily lose this race. Would I say right now that it's very possible? No. I think that the Republican would have to try very hard. And it may even involve what I said in Nevada, a case like Virginia, where the Republican needs to take the endorsement to get the Donald Trump base, but also not take it overboard. It could be a case like that, and we'll just have to wait and see. As of today, I would say that the Republicans have a better chance in the state of Arizona. And while I already said that Nevada might go to the Democrat, Cortez Masto, it could easily go to the Republicans. And that would give the Republicans a 54-seat advantage. Again, right now, I think Cortez Masto has a better shot at winning than Mark Kelly does, but that could ultimately change. And that could change in a matter of 2 weeks. That could change by next year. I don't know. But my final prediction, if the election was happening tomorrow, would be that the Republicans might even have a better chance in the state of Nevada. I'm not going to say they would. I think that would be a very hard race to decide. But I think that the Republicans could win it if they did what Glenn Youngkin was able to do in Virginia in 2021. And I know I keep bringing up Virginia. And New Jersey's a good race too. New Jersey, Joe Biden won by over 15 points in the 2020 presidential election. Just a year later, it's like a 2-point difference between the Republican and Democrat. Obviously, Phil Murphy won in New Jersey. However, that could have easily not happened. And the Republican could have won. That would have been horrible for Democrats. It is already horrible that all three top state seats in Virginia went to Republicans. They all flipped. Current governor, Ralph Northam, flipped, Republican. Now Glenn Youngkin. Lieutenant governor, flipped, Winsome Sears. Attorney general, flipped, Jason Miyares. We're talking about real Republican possibilities where Republicans have a good chance in winning in states that you might have never thought that they could win. States like Nevada, where yes, it was a toss-up in the 2020 presidential election, but never a year ago would you have imagined that Nevada would go to a Republican come 2022. But that's the case that we're in because Republicans have the energy factor and Republicans are more popular. That wraps up today's video. Today's video shows that my final prediction, if the election was happening tomorrow, would be Republicans winning by 54 seats, Democrats at 46 seats. And I think this should worry Democrats, and they should change their strategy going into the 2022 midterms if they expect to win certain seats that they need to win to keep that majority. I appreciate you all so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed, please give a like down below. If you have any thoughts on this video, please leave them down below. Give me your thoughts on some of these key races like Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, other key races. Give me your thoughts down below on what you think could happen differently. And give me margins as well. I would love to hear them. I'll reply to your comments. I appreciate you all so much for watching today's video. It means so much. And I will see you all in the next video.